All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Eniola Sabia, and for today's course, I'll be taking Introduction to Laravel, and my Slack username is Attorney for sure, so you can always reach me after the class for any question you may have. All right, so yeah, let's get started. So Laravel. What is Laravel? Laravel is a free open source PHP web framework which was created by Taylor Otwell, and it is intended for the development of web applications following the model view controller architectural pattern MVC, and it is also based on Symfony. All right. So I know I used a lot of big words here that you may not, or you may find it hard to break down. So I'll be taking each word here and then I'll be actually breaking it down so you can have a deeper understanding of what Laravel is. So first thing here is open source. What is open source? And when they say open source, or when the term open source is being referred to, it's literally just means a code that is designed to be publicly accessible. That is, anyone can see it, they can modify it, and then they can distribute the code as they like, and they can even use it for their project or use a part of the code or do whatever they want to it. So that is what they mean by Laravel is open source. It's a framework. A framework is a piece of code that detects your project architecture, which I mean the architecture which your project will follow. And a framework will provide you with hooks and callbacks so that like your so that like how would I put it, your code just gets run where it is needed to be run. So like how what do I mean by this? Laravel is a framework because it gives you like a kind of an architecture to follow, which Laravel uses the MVC architecture. So what you just do here is you just put your codes in your custom code wherever you want to do it, and then Laravel is still going to execute like a pattern, and then it's going to reach where it's going to like follow your code. But in all ideal sense, what frameworks literally do is that they guide and that they dictate the architecture which your project will be following. Most frameworks do, and yeah, that's why Laravel is a framework. Now, for the model view controller, what that's MVC. And what is MVC? MVC is an architectural pattern that provides a reusable solution to resolve common problems that occur while developing web application. It separates an application into three main logical components: the model, view, and controller. So I'll be digging deeper to MVC because Laravel is really like based on MVC. So, but what here is saying is that what this is saying here is that MVC is like it's an architectural pattern, okay? Yes. So it is solving a very major issue that over the years developers have experienced, whereby they need to separate like business logic. You must have heard things like business logic from the views and then things like that. So MVC is one of these architectural patterns that actually solve this problem that developers have been having. That's when they are building a web application and then probably just mixing everything together and then they finding a way to separate it. So that's what MVC is solving. And then for the last thing here, which is Symfony, and Symfony is more or less like another framework, a PHP framework, or you can say it's also a set of reusable PHP components that are used to build a web application, API, microservices, and web services. So going back here, we can say now that we can understand all the terms here by when we say Laravel is free. Of course, free is we can easily access it. We don't have to pay a dime or any amount of money to get Laravel. Open source, you can take the code, modify it anyhow you want, and use it to your own satisfaction. And of course, you understand what PHP web framework is, and it was created by Taylor Otwell. That was the founder or the creator, or let's say the person who started Laravel, of course, and is intended for the development of web applications following the MVC architectural pattern, and it is based on Symfony. So now I think the definition of what Laravel is a bit clearer. So moving on to who are the guys that use Laravel? Like, why should we even be looking at getting Laravel? So according to Stackshare.io/Laravel, these companies actually use Laravel, Mastercard, Flutterwaves, Wattpad, TransferGo, Razorpay, and Bitpanda. They have identified in the stacks that they use, in the stacks they use, that Laravel is part of one of the things they use for building web applications. So yes, that is for, and there are so many more people who, of course, use Laravel, but these are just a few to mention. So now a deeper look into MVC, because you really need to understand this concept to be able to work with Laravel. Model. The model is responsible for managing the data of the application. It responds to the view, and it also responds to the instructions for the controller to update himself. Okay, so like the model is, I'm going to try to put this in an example, but okay, what I'll do is I'm going to go through everything here, and then I'm going to give a simpler example to explain how everything works in, like, giving a real life scenario. The view is the view. So the view component is used for like all UI logic of the application. The view includes all UI components such as text box, drop downs, buttons, and then these are just things that the final user, which is everyone that will be accessing your site, what they interact with. So that is everything that comes under the view. And then the controller. So the controller is like the main guy doing connecting these two people together. So the controller is responsible for controlling the application logic and acts as the coordinator between the view and the model. As I said, it's like the baba of model and view. And then the controller receives input from the users via the view, and then it processes this user's data and helps, and then it processes this user's data with the help of the model, and then it passes the results back to the view. So it's like a simple flow which goes like, from view it goes to the controller. The controller takes data from the view process I mean the sorry, why am I making a mistake? The controller takes input from the users via the view. That means it takes input from the view, then it processes this user data with the help of model, and then it passes the results back into the view. All right, so using a real life scenario, let's look at a shop. Let's just take, for example, a shop, and then there are like two people working there. So let's say one person or one of the people working there is responsible for taking the customer requests. So we can put this person who's in charge of taking customers' requests as the view. Okay, then we can also look at the item that the customer wants to have as the model. So what is the customer actually going to the shop to get? So we can look at that as the model. So the properties, and then the data of like the properties of the data that the customer wants to come and get is the model. And then the third person that will be in this shop is going to be responsible for wrapping and making the make I mean, is going to be responsible for wrapping it. They are making the package nice and giving it back to the customer. So it goes like this. I'm a customer. Let's just take the shop example once again. I go to the shop. I meet someone at the counter who takes my request. So this guy is the view component. Then this view component is going to give my request to the third person that is going to be, or the second person that is going to be wrapping it, and then actually even getting this information from the item. And then the item itself is, let's just say, the model. So this person, after I give my request to the person in front in the counter, that is the view. This view submits this information to the controller. The controller actually takes this information from the view, then he processes it, and then he checks the model, which the data or the products they have in stock, and then they see what is corresponding or what they need to get back from me, the customer. Then once he gets everything, it makes it look nice. Probably gets one or two things, prepares the food, and then do the all necessary items or necessary processes to be done. Then he gives this information or this package back to the view. That means the guy at the counter. And then this person then gives me, the customer, the package I wanted or I came for to the store. So that is just a, I hope you got that, a better example way to explain MVC. So without taking any much of time, let's just start installing Laravel. And then there are actually two different stages of installing Laravel. There are a lot of ways you can actually install Laravel. You can use Docker, you can do a lot of things, but the best way I will advise everyone to install Laravel is using a Composer. And you can also access it's because using Composer is way more easier to use for installing Laravel, because first off, when you're installing dependencies and things like that, you still need Composer. So why not just start off by using Composer, and then it's very, very easy to use and set up. So we're going to be doing that now. Also, to see the other methods of installing Laravel, you can just, sorry. All right. So to see the other methods of installing Laravel, you can just go to their website, and then you see the different methods of actually installing Laravel. They have a very, very good doc. And also, one good advice for everyone is Laravel's docs is very, very good. Like, if you could go through the docs well, it's very detailed, and then you'll be fine. So I will just go to open the Laravel site. All right. Then I'll click this first link here. And of course, you should see this button here, which is showing us that we should access the documentation. So we just click this, and yes, we are here. Also, one thing I forgot to outline is that there are different versions of Laravel. It started all the way back from Laravel 4.2, and then right now, 2020/2021, we are on Laravel 8. So you can always check through, but I won't advise going back the years for using older versions of Laravel, because Laravel 8 is so much better, and then they've made a lot of things simpler, and then they've just simplified a lot of things. So you should be looking at Laravel 8 and not looking at older year versions. So for how to install Laravel, just click the installation here, and you should see Laravel. So earlier I said there are different ways you can install Laravel. So if I should click for how to install Laravel, you'll be seeing this option of you being required to install Docker Desktop. So you can also use Docker, and Docker is like, it's like a package manager also, but it's used for more of DevOps and things like that. So use it to like manage your packages and things like that. But it can be, Docker can be a bit taxing or hard to set up. I'm just putting that like that. It's not actually hard. I don't want to say anything is hard, because yeah, it should, everything should be easy. All right. So Docker is Docker is like a package manager, but it's used in like more of advanced things. No, that doesn't sound right. Well, let's just check what Docker is. Sorry. All right, so Docker is a set of platform as a service products that uses OS level virtualization to deliver software in packages called containers. Containers are isolated from one another and bundle their own software libraries and configuration files. They can communicate with each other, blah blah blah. So what Docker is like, it's a package container like management system, whereby it helps you to like, in big scale applications whereby you're having like one cloud server, and then you want to have multiple things running on it, you use things like Docker. But we're still focusing on Laravel, so don't let me move on to Docker. So this is, they give you the Docker way of installing Laravel. I won't really advise that because it can be a bit tasking to set up. So you also have this other one of installing Laravel with sales services, and this is the one we are going to be using for the course now, installing via Composer. So also you also need Composer to really get started, and if you don't have Composer, that's the first stage of installing Laravel. You need to get Composer, and then to get it you can just get it through this link, or you can just search Composer and then download Composer, or just get Composer, then you go here again and see download. Okay, so this is where you actually access or get Composer, and it's as easy as just copying this line of code here. Then when you've done this, all you need to do is you open your terminal, or for Mac, and if you're on Windows, you open your command prompt, and then once you do that, you just paste the code there, and then you're all good to go. You're good to go, and then it's going to set up everything and also install Docker, and then you'll be able to also access the Docker command line interface. So if you have installed Docker, you just copy and paste the code on your terminal, and of course, which is this, and then you're good to go. Then you can move on to installing Laravel. And of course, if you already have Composer installed, you don't have to repeat the process of installing it again. So that is why I won't be running this, because I already have Composer installed. Okay. So for installing Laravel, it's as easy as copying this line of code from the site here, which is Composer global require Laravel slash installer. So this is going to install the Laravel installer as a global Composer dependency. And there are actually two ways you can create a new Laravel project. You can either first install the Laravel installer, then you can create a new project using the Laravel installer, or you can just directly use this here, and then you just type in Composer slash create Laravel slash Laravel example lab. So I'm going to be using these two examples to see and to show you that they both work fine. Okay, so I'm just going to change directory to my desktop. Okay, and for creating one, I'm just going to copy and paste that code, which is this Composer. Hope you can see my screen. Let me try to increase this. Okay, so for the first line, which is using this command here, which is Composer create project Laravel slash Laravel example lab. What I have to do is just type in this create project Laravel slash Laravel. Then I put in the project name I want here. So let me just say Zuri app 1. And then I click enter. So it is going to do the whole process of getting Composer is going to download Laravel and then just set up my project for me. And of course, this can take a while depending on how fast your system is. And yes, we're done. So it has set up my project, my Laravel project for me. And then I'm just going to change directory into that project, which is Zuri app 1. Yes. And then, of course, I can also run this. But before I run this, I also like to test the next example of first downloading the global dependency. So you just have to run this command here, which is Composer global require Laravel slash installer. So this is going to install Laravel installer as a global dependency. Okay, so I'm just going to copy and paste this to my terminal. And of course, if you don't have terminal if you are using a Windows, you won't have terminal, so you'll be using command prompt. And then I'm going to run this. Done. So I already have Laravel installer on my system, so it's just going to be upgrading for me. But if you're running this command for the first time, it's going to actually install it, and then you may see a bit of more processes written here. Okay, so once you've done that, in this step, you can now always create a new project using the Laravel new and then the name of the project you want. So I'm going to also do that here. First, I'm going to CD back to my desktop. Okay, so now I've changed directly to my desktop, and then I'm just going to create a new Laravel project, and then I'll name this Zuri app 2. and it's going to start creating. So I would actually, I like, for me, based on preference, you can actually use any of these two, whether the first step using composer create slash create project, Laravel slash Laravel, and then the project name, or using this process of first installing this. And then also you would need to only do this once. You don't do it more than once. Once you've installed this for the first time, to create new projects, all you have to do is write Laravel new and then the project name, and you're good to go. So yes, and then we are done with creating a new Laravel project. So I'm going to cd to this, change directory to this too. Okay, so I would want to open this tool in my Visual Studio Code, and then also this in my Visual Studio Code. Okay, so just a new window, Surya 1. Okay, great. So if you should see, there is no difference between the two applications. You have the same thing, whether you create it with Laravel installer or you create it with Laravel with Composer create project command. It's the same thing, and then you're still on the good track. So moving on to what we have next. So after you've created the project using the command line, you then move on to changing to the directory of the project, that is cd, then the project name, and then you finally type php artisan serve to actually view this on your browser. So I'm going to create php, type in php artisan serve on the tool. Okay, so it's going to start a development server which is at this port. So I'm just going to, you can copy and paste this, or you can just, I'm going to copy and paste this in my browser. And boom, once you see this page, you have successfully installed Laravel on your application and you're on the right track. And also, once you it's still the same process, just type in the PHP artisan serve and it should give you this, and then you're good to go. So you will notice something, you've failed to listen on port this. That's because I'm already having another um application running on this port, and two applications can run on the same port. So that is why this one is starting on 127.0.01 port 8001, not 8000. So if I also copy and paste this, it's also going to run. And yes, we've successfully installed Laravel, and then we have a good and running app. So I'm just going to delete, close working with this one, and then stick with Zuriapp 2. Okay, and then I'm going to close this one too. Okay, great. So moving on to the next thing, which is the Laravel directory structure. So if you should see the project here, so you would notice that yes, Laravel comes bundled up. It creates a series of files that you may be lost at first. That what is all this? Bootstrap, config, database. It's all fine. It's normal, and that's what's. This is like the process, as I said, the framework of Laravel. Like this is where you have to put in your code to make things work. So every Laravel app comes this way, and then you don't have to worry about anything of, or you trying to delete anything. They are all necessary. So I'll be explaining each of these folders and what they do. So the first one is the app folder, which is this. And then what the app folder does is that it contains the core code of your application and a variety of other directives which will be generated inside the app directory as you use the make artisan command to generate classes. Okay, so what does this mean? I would open this app folder, and then you see it comes in with a bunch of other stuffs like console, exceptions, HTTP, and then models and providers. Okay, so Console is for where you put in your kernel codes, and then this is more of like advanced when you're really going deep into like using Laravel to do some things maybe related to command line and things like that. So that's where you really touch things here. But most web applications do not really have to bother about doing anything here. Exceptions. This is where you handle like exceptions of like your code or probably authentication and then different things here. So this is where you handle or you put in the code for handling exceptions, as the name says. HTTP. So HTTP contains two other folders, controller and then middleware. So the controller contains like, this is where you actually put in from MVC method. This is where you put in the controllers that actually communicates the models and the view. Okay, so this is where you get the controller files in it. So when you start creating more applications in Laravel and then you start using the PHP artisan command. Yes. So also, I may have forgotten to mention this, but when you create a Laravel application, it comes with something called like the artisan command. And then this help you do a lot of scaffolding and different other things to make your life easier. And that's why a lot of developers love Laravel. Okay, so you can do a lot of things like creating a controller using the artisan command. You can create your database migrations, you can optimize, you can clear your cache, you can create a route and different things like that that you can do using the artisan command. And then it's very, very, very helpful. And then as time goes on, we'll be seeing more of this. Then the bootstrap folder. So the bootstrap folder contains the app.php, which bootstraps the application. So this is where everything is being joined together, as it says, bootstrap, to bring multiple things, like strap them into one. So let's take a look at what's in the bootstrap folder. So it has this file here called catch, and yes, this file is not going to be pushed to GitHub. That's why it has this .git ignore, and then it's going to ignore everything here. So this is the main code for bootstrap, for the bootstrap folder. So as you can see here, this is where we actually join all this big project together, and then we actually launch it here. So first here you have to create the application, and then of course they've commented it very well, so you can easily read this up and then understand what is happening. But basically the bootstrap folder contains where you actually like contains the app.php file that bootstraps the whole framework, that is Laravel. Then the config folder. So the config folder contains all your applications configuration files, and then we're going to take a look at it also. So we have app.php. This contains like basic configs for your application. We also have the auth.php. When you start making authentication for your application, you make edits here to suit what you want. You also have the broadcasting channel for handling the drivers and then connections and what driver you may want to use. You also have cache, where you may want to store whether array, database, file, those are the configs here. And then we also have cores, cross-origin, resource sharing. Okay, so this is where you want to protect your application, or we are building an API with Laravel, and then you would like to make your application more secure by enabling calls. So you do the config here. Then for database, this is the config that contains like the database you may want to use for your Laravel application. And then Laravel supports SQLite, MySQL, PGSQL, that's PostgreSQL, and then SQL SRV. I don't know about that one. But the major ones you use are PostgreSQL, MySQL, and sometimes you may use SQLite depending on what type of application you're building. Then for file system, this config contains the way your Laravel application is going to be handling files, and then whether it's going to be local, public, and then S3, Amazon S3. So you also be getting some variables for this from your env file to make this work. and then for symbolic links to make your links accessible, and that's what file systems is for. Then for hashing, this is where you put in like the config for your hashing and maybe how you want to save passwords of your users and things like that. Then for login, this is for error handling and then just basically logging of all types. So you specify what type of log channel you want to make your Laravel application, how you want to actually handle or save your logs for your Laravel application. Yeah. So this config contains the drivers and then how you can, what options you can actually choose. Then for mail, so if your application requires sending an email to, email to the users, then you'll be using this config here. So we can send mail through SMTP. You can also send mail through Amazon SCS, simple email service, and then you can send with Mailgun, Postmark, Send Mail, Log, Array, and then these are just different drivers that you can use the mail driver, the mail config supports by default. Then for queue, this depends on how you want to handle queues in your application. You can probably log this to the database, Beanstalk, SQS, Redis, and then also how you want to handle field jobs. So you specify that here. Service config is for handling the third-party services that you may just want to add to your Laravel application. So this is where you add your config for them. Then for handling sessions, you specify the session driver and how you want to handle session in this session config file, the connection, the table, and where you're storing it, and the cookie, and different other things. So this is where you update and then update that for session. Then for the view, so this is where you specify your view path and then also some other things like where you put the compiled part of your view before being launched to the users, and this is just the view config. So we've taken a look at the config folder and then what it has in it, and that is the config folder. Again, it contains all your application's configuration files. Now, moving on to the database folder. So the database folder contains anything that has to do with your database. It's simply put that way. And then it contains your database migrations, seeders, factories, and so many other things. You'll be working with this a whole lot when you start or get deeper into Laravel. So it contains your factories, migrations, seeders, and then factories is like a way to put in demo data in your database. So you may create a a may create an application and then you want to just probably populate your database with like 50 users and things like that. So you can actually do that using factories, or you can do that using seeders. Okay, so that is for factory. And then for migration, this is where you actually create your database. This is where you also create your database. And then what makes Laravel another very powerful framework is that the fact it offers migration. So earlier in the introduction to my SQL course, if you could remember, we were having to create we needed to create the database on our PHP admin dashboard. Then we come into our PHP code and then we modify this data and then we make everything to match and rhyme. But using Laravel, you can do all that from code and then you don't have to view any dashboard, and a lot of developers love this and it makes productivity time faster. So for example, when you create a Laravel application, it actually comes with these three default migrations: the create users table, create password reset table, and then create field jobs table. Because by default, Laravel expects that your app is going to be getting or saving users information of some kind. So that is why these tables are here. These migrations are here. And then to actually launch these migrations, you type in a command in the using the artisan, which is PHP artisan migrate. So once you type this, it actually runs your migration and then it creates the table and then do whatever you've actually specified there. And then for seeders, also seeders is another way for you to create data or put in like demo data or actually even run factories. Okay, so that's for the database folder. Moving on to the public folder. The public folder contains the index.php file, and this is like the entry point for all requests entering your application, and then it also configures autoloading. This directory also houses your other assets such as images, JavaScript files, and then CSS. So let's check out this. So by default, it comes with the .htaccess 5 icon, the index.php, which we stated earlier. So this is where it is the application actually starts from. So this file is first seen, just like every web page we create. As advice, you always have an index.php file to start your server in your folder. So this is like the index.php for Laravel. So every application starts from here before actually moving on to other things or before other things are being run. So yes, that's for the index.php, and then you also have this robot.txt and web.config. So these are all for server stuffs. Also, we have the resource folder, and then this resource folder contains your views as well as your raw uncompiled assets such as less SAS or JavaScript. I forgot to add something there, but it also contains your views. So the resource folder contains your CSS when you're going to be using mixing and some probably when you're trying to do Node.js or working with Vue, you'll be using this resource folder CSS very much. Also the JS folder where you actually require your Bootstrap or your Node modules when you're working with Laravel and then Node.js. You also have the bootstrap.js here, which is calling this is this file, and then this is calling that. Okay. Okay. So then you also have the language here, which is for handling multiple languages in your system. So let's say you're building a very, very big system that is going to be having different languages like English, French, French, and then you have like multiple languages like English, French. You have to bend, I mean, sorry, you have multiple languages. When you're building an application that has multiple languages like English, French, or it's a multilingual application, you specify different languages here in this language folder. So it's actually under this language folder, there is English, and then you can have multiple folders, for example, French, and then here you specify the text for that language. Then for the views, this is where you actually write your HTML code for the application. Okay, so yes, this is just where you actually put in your views for the following the MVC structure that Laravel comes with. So the views come in here. Okay, now moving on to the routes folder. The route folder contains all the route definitions for your application. So you can also use Laravel for building APIs and of course normal web applications. For building APIs, if you were to create APIs, you specify your API routes inside this API.php under the route folder. So by default, it comes with this one, which is the routes, and then it activates the authentication API middleware, the authentication middleware for the API users. And then you can also add other routes in here. Then for the you add the route for your web application and then what route you want your application to actually have. So you put them in here. And then the basic one it comes with is the route gets and then this home slash function, and it just returns this welcome.php. So this view here is going to be matching with the view you have here in the resource folder. So if you were to create another view here like page one, page1.blade.php. Okay, so what you want to do here is, and you want to also route, you want to add a route here to get that page. So what you're indirectly doing here is that when your users get on the endpoint or on the route, let's say some page, then I want to return, I'm not going to need this. I want to return the view and then just say page one, sorry, page one dot blade dot php. Okay, so let me just do something here to show that this is working. And then let's put in hello. This is page two. So if I go back to my browser where my application is running, then I go do slash some page. Sorry. Oh, okay. So yes, I'm not meant to specify the .blade.php here. All I'm just going to be doing is specifying the name of the page, removing the .blade.php, because every page is going to be having .blade.php. So Laravel actually handles the fact that we don't have to put it again. Okay, yes. So once I've created a new route, which is slash some page. So once my users come to this URL, they see this. So that is how the this route is connected to the views. Okay. So moving on to the next folder, that is the storage folder. The storage folder. So the storage folder contains your compiled Blade template, file-based sessions, file caches, and other files generated by the framework. So this is where you actually be doing a lot of storage, or your whether your your application is where it's actually storing data, or you may actually decide to store some information here. And what do I mean by this? So we're going to dig deeper into what is in the storage folder. So yes, in the storage folder we have app, which is, so yeah, you can actually put in things you may want to save for your application. So it comes with this public folder, and then you can decide you want to save some other things here. Then that's this framework. So Laravel is Laravel uses this one. This is where they save the cache sessions, created 2 sessions now, and then probably for testing and then different things. So you don't have any business to do with the framework under the storage. This is what Laravel uses and needs. And then of course your compiled views. So Laravel has it here, or saves it here. Okay. Then the last one here is the views, and then you also have your logs. So this is where your logs are being saved. So this is the log of, so for this log you actually get everything that has been running or going through or has been happening to your application. So you have this here, like started by when I first opened this page. So it basically logs errors. So once an error is like detected on your application by the user, once you open the log, you should see it here. And then one error we actually encountered now was the fact that we're trying to call blade.php, page1.blade.php, which was not found. So it was logged here, and then the stack trace is going to be given. So this helps for debugging, and then especially when your app is in production and then you see maybe users are complaining of an issue. So you come to the log and then you can go through the stack trace and then see what is happening. Okay. We also have the tests directory. So this contains automated tests. And then this is, I keep saying and then. Okay, this test directory contains tests. So when you're writing tests for your application, once it's getting very big, you are advised to write tests to actually test every component or every function or everything you write and to see that it works perfectly fine. So you use this test folder and this is where your tests come in. So this is like a basic test case and you may be working with this more often as the course progresses. But every form of automated test goes in this test folder. Lastly, you have the vendor directory. This vendor directory contains all your composer dependencies. So you'll be having nothing to do with this also, because this is where all dependencies you install or Laravel uses stays. From your composer to even the main Laravel source code, the framework, everything stays here in the composer, I mean in the vendor folder. So you don't have anything to do here, but it is just where what Laravel uses to store packages. Okay, so that is the Laravel directory structure. And then moving on to the, I said and then again. Okay, so moving to the .env. The .env is another very important file we must touch before closing the class for today. It contains the major or what's like major configs, because Laravel wants us to reduce how often we come here to be actually edit data or things like our application name. So they have this env, and then if I should come here to some things like this app, you will see that this config env is actually picking the env again. I mean, it's picking the what the env of the application is saying. Also, the env is also always important to keep some secret keys safe. What do I mean by that? Maybe you're working on an application and then you'll be pushing it to something like GitHub, and it's probably an open source, and then you have like production keys or things like that, or let's just say you have secret keys that you of course you won't want to share to other people, but them fixing theirs once they need the application to be run. So you save things like that in the env folder, in the env file, and then you call it in your application. And to call it in your application is as simple as just writing env and the variable name of the env. What do I mean by the variable name? That is, for example, the app name here equals to, this is the variable here, and this is the data that is getting into this variable. So the basic env configs we have are the app.env, and this value defines your environment that will be used on your server. So there are majorly three environments you can use. You can actually do development, we also have staging, and we have production. But for basic sake, you can just classify them as two: development and production. So development is, of course, once you are testing on your machine like this, or local, sorry. Local can be used when you're testing on your machine like this, or when you're still building the application. Then once you go to production, you switch your app._env type to production, and then this just specifies how it is going to change the way your application will be running, especially if you have set clauses for whether if the application is on production or in development stage, how you want it to run. You also have the app debug. You also have the app debug variable, and this field determines whether debugging tools will be available or not. And I will always suggest to keep this in sync with your app env, because when your app env is in production, then your app debug should be forced. What is that app debug saying? So for example, we had an issue with having, okay, let's do this. Let me just create an error again here in this views to show you how the app debug works. Browse. So let me just have put a wrong name here. Let's just put page. And of course, the name is page one. So if I should do this and go back to that route and refresh this, I will be seeing this. Of course, this is meant to help me to actually debug this and should be seen to only the developer. It is going to be unprofessional if a user is seeing this on the application and let's say it's in production, maybe because he ran into an error or something. So this is very unprofessional. So what you do when you're pushing your application to production state, you change this value from up here to false. So and let's see how false will work. So let me refresh this. And you should see server error. So it's more better to just show your user something like this as server error, and they're like, they come or maybe make a complaint that, hi, dev team, I don't know, I have this issue and all. So they see this instead of seeing the actual or seeing what the developer is meant to be seeing. So of course, this can scare them like, okay, why am I seeing your code? I don't trust this software, things like that. So that is why you should always not forget to change this to false when you're going for production. Then we also have the app key. So this app key is like a random key that is used in the process of generating and verifying passwords for your application. Okay, so this saves, like, this makes your application like, this helps you to prevent against things like this helps you to prevent against hackers from actually having access into your hacking through your passwords and things like that, because this key is like, it can work like as a, I'm not going to say CRS. I'm trying to see a very good example to explain what the app key is for. But in general, what the app key majorly is for is it is used for process of actually generating and verifying passwords from users, and it is always a unique key that is usually this long, and then you can always change this to whether you want to maybe log out all users in your from your application and then refresh something. To get a new key, all you have to do is just type in the artisan command, php artisan generate. Your artisan generate key generate, sorry. Okay, and then of course you see that my app key here changes immediately. So if I want to refresh, like log out all users in my system, all I have to do is compress in the type in the PHP artisan key generate command, and then it changes that. And it is always unique and it should be long and it's not something anybody can always guess. Okay, then the app URL, this variable just contains the application address, and it is used for creating parts from links and assets. So that is just what the app URL is for. So you always want to change this depending on what your app is. So if your app is something like zuriapp2.com, you change this to zuriapp2.com and so on. So that is what the app URL is for. Then for the DB, so we can see we have the 6 fields here for the DB. We have MySQL, DB host, DB port, DB database, DB username, and DB password. So of course, every 1 year, as we touched in the MySQL introduction course, you understand the DB host, which is for connecting to the host which your database is hosted upon, in which your database host is host. I didn't get that right. The DB host contains the host of your database, simply put that way. Then for the DB port, the port in which your database is actually being hosted here, and then the default is usually 3306. Then for your DB database, this is going to be the database you've created on your MySQL database system or the database system you're using. Of course, you can always change this, and let's just leave this here as Zuri app 2. It's by default comes with the name of the application you specify when creating the Laravel app. Then for the DB username, root or whatever username it is for you, you specify that here, and then for a password, you will always have a password here. Don't push a passwordless database to production. It's not advisable. So the only thing here that can be changing or it's a bit constrained is the DB connection. So earlier stated, when we're checking out the config file here, we have different types of database that Laravel actually supports. So Laravel supports SQLite, as said, MySQL, PGSQL, PostgreSQL, and SQL Service, I think, SRV. So you can specify which DB connection or what type of database you may want to use. And then, of course, you can also add multiple or different types of database. If you want to actually add other types of database to this, you can add them here and then put in the connection or the values for them in here. So that is just talking about the env file. So we've been able to go through everything that's the whole of Laravel application structure. And yes, so that will be the end of the class for today. I hope you learned something new. Bye, and good luck on exploring more things on Laravel. Thank you.